I came home from a long shift, only to find 3 toddlers in floaties bobbing in my pool, a teenager grilling hot dogs on my deck, and a woman I had never seen before applying sunscreen on my patio furniture like she owned it. One kid even asked me if I had any more ketchup. Confused, I scanned the chaos in front of me, 20 or so people lounging in and around my backyard like it was a public resort. A guy in cargo shorts waved at me with a soda in hand and shouted, "Hey man, your place is awesome. Karen said it's community access now." My jaw hit the driveway. Who the hell was Karen? The truth unraveled fast. Apparently, Karen, a self-declared queen of the HOA, had informed the entire neighborhood that my private backyard pool was now considered public. According to her twisted logic, because I didn't cover my pool with a tarp, it was now an implied amenity for neighborhood enrichment. It was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard until I saw her fake HOA bulletin printed on pastel pink paper, complete with a community aquatic access policy that she had drafted herself and circulated door to door. To my horror, some people had actually believed it. And not just believed it, they had celebrated it like it was an upgrade from their own dull backyards. When I finally found her, Karen was perched near my fence line like some nosy garden gnome in yoga pants and pearls. I stormed over and told her to get off my property, but she held up a laminated version of her homemade flyer and smiled like a smug villain from a soap opera. "Jason," she said, "this neighborhood thrives on shared spaces. You really ought to read the HOA's fine print." I told her I had read the actual fine print. And nowhere in the HOA handbook did it say my privately built, privately maintained pool could suddenly become everyone's weekend destination. She gave me a wink and walked off like she just won a courtroom case. I stood there fuming, watching more families arrive, some even dragging coolers full of soda and pool noodles like they were checking into a water park. I tried reasoning with people. I explained it was my property, my pool, my insurance liability on the line. But every explanation was met with something worse than defiance, indifference. It was like I'd walked into an alternate dimension where personal property meant nothing, and Karen was the president of the entire universe. I even had one parent shrug and say, "Well, if Karen said it's okay, then it's probably fine." Meanwhile, a kid poured fruit punch into the pool like it was a giant cocktail bowl. My hands clenched. My pulse pounded. I was seconds from snapping. And that's when I saw it. Someone had spray-painted "Public Oasis" on my back fence. That was it. I didn't sleep that night. While Karen and her army of inflatable flamingos probably dreamt of more neighborhood improvements. I sat at my desk with a notepad, sketching the outline of something even more chaotic, even more unhinged than anything Karen had ever seen. I needed something loud, colorful, dramatic, and absolutely unforgettable. Not just to get rid of the invaders, but to make a statement so powerful, it would echo through HOA meetings for generations. I considered installing a crocodile decoy. I even briefly looked up live octopus rentals. But those weren't permanent enough. I needed something that would make people think twice before invading my backyard ever again. That's when I stumbled on a video of a Japanese game show where contestants tried to walk across pools filled with gelatin. I laughed until I cried. Then I laughed some more. And then I ordered 600 gallons of pool-safe colored gel. Ocean blue. Non-toxic. Slippery. Impossible to ignore. I didn't just want Karen to stop using my pool. I wanted her to regret the day she ever pointed at it. The next morning, I walked outside, coffee in hand, and watched another stranger dive into my pool like it was a hotel in Cancun. It would be the last time. They didn't know it yet. But Jell-O pool justice was coming. And when it hit, it would make Karen and her HOA cronies wish they'd picked someone else to mess with. Because if my pool was going to be public, then they were going to find out exactly how creative the public could be. The next day, the neighborhood group chat lit up with messages about a so-called emergency HOA meeting. Hosted not at the community center or clubhouse, but in Karen's oversized garage, where she'd taped up posters like, "Pool unity equals community," and Jason's pool belongs to all. I showed up. Not because I wanted to participate, but because I needed to witness the level of absurdity Karen was operating on. About 20 people showed up. Folding chairs aligned like it was a TED Talk. Karen stood at the front with a cheap wireless mic, flanked by two of her gossip gremlin allies, Sandy and Deborah, who clapped like trained seals every time Karen opened her mouth. Neighbors, Karen began. It has come to my attention that certain individuals are resistant to the concept of shared amenities. However, unity is stronger than selfishness. And in the spirit of fairness, the board, that's me and a few others, have decided that Jason's pool, as it sits at the heart of our community, should be available to all residents for recreational use. A few people nodded. Some even clapped. I stayed silent, letting the wave of dumb wash over the room. Karen waved around a laminated document again, trying to look official. But anyone with half a brain could see it was typed in Comic Sans and had more typos than a third grader's book report. I recorded the whole thing on my phone. When she opened the floor for testimonies, Sandy stood up and dramatically claimed that ever since she started using my pool, her back pain had decreased and her stress levels had vanished. Deborah said her kids finally made friends because of the shared aquatic environment. Someone else compared it to a town square. Another person said they saved hundreds of dollars not having to drive to a public pool anymore. I almost laughed out loud. But instead, I leaned back, let them finish their comedy routine, and then walked out without saying a word. I had everything I needed. They had just made my case for me with video evidence. I didn't go home right away. I drove straight to the warehouse district across town and met with a guy named Luke, who ran a bizarre company that provided props for extreme game show style parties. He looked like the type of person who lived off caffeine and chaos. And after I told him what I was planning, he didn't even blink. You want 600 gallons of pool-safe gel? What color? And you want it to bounce, wobble, and coat everything like an alien swamp, but not damage your tiles? I nodded. Cool, he said, already texting someone. We can deliver by Saturday. I'll throw in some UV dye for shimmer if you want. No extra charge. Back home, I kept the plan tight. Only my cousin Marcus was in on it. He'd be helping with the late-night pool drain and fill. We scheduled the job for Friday at 11 p.m. just after Karen's next community swim night ended. That evening, I pretended to go along with things. I even smiled when a guy I didn't know cracked open a cold beer in my yard like it was a sports bar. Karen strutted around in a wide-brimmed sun hat, handing out coupons for her Etsy shop and winking at people like she was some beloved village mayor. I nodded, waved, smiled like a broken man. But inside, I was on fire. The moment the last person left and the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus pulled into my driveway with a rented industrial pump and two huge tanks. We siphoned the pool water into a makeshift holding tank in my side yard. Because even in war, I had plans to restore the pool when the madness ended. Then we got to work. The gel came in massive barrels with warning labels that read, "Slippery when awesome." We mixed in a hint of green-blue shimmer and began pouring. It took 4 hours. And more sweat than I care to admit. But when we were done, the pool had transformed into a luminous, jiggling jelly abyss. Even the moonlight reflected off its surface like it was some magical glowing pond from a fantasy movie. We cleaned up the area, wiped all footprints, and set a camera on a tree to capture everything from a wide angle. Then I went inside and slept like a king who had laid the perfect trap. By 10 a.m., the usual crowd began trickling in. Karen in her hat, Sandy with her yoga mat, Deborah holding a tray of gluten-free muffins like this was some wholesome family picnic. They didn't notice at first. The top layer of the gel was still and calm, reflecting the sky so perfectly it looked like water. That illusion shattered when a kid ran up, jumped off the edge, and landed with a loud, gelatinous thump that echoed like a dropped watermelon.
He didn't sink. He didn't splash. He bounced.
Then he screamed, flailed, and rolled onto the sticky, shimmering surface, totally confused.
Everyone stared. Karen blinked twice.
Then, like clockwork, she started screaming.
"What is this? What did you do?"
I leaned back in my chair and smiled. "You wanted a public pool," I said, gesturing to the jiggling mess.
"Well, welcome to it."
A few of the kids started jumping on it like it was a trampoline. One of the dads laughed so hard he fell over. Karen, however, looked like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. She stormed toward me, face as red as a lobster.
"This is vandalism," she shrieked. "You've ruined it. You've ruined the community." I shrugged. "My pool. My rules. Unless, you're saying it's not public?" She froze.
Her logic trap snapped shut around her ankles.
People were laughing now. Really laughing. Phones came out. Videos were taken.
Someone called it Gelgate. I had only wanted to reclaim my pool.
But I was about to become the center of the internet's next viral meltdown. And Karen. She was about to learn the one thing worse than being proven wrong.
Being proven wrong in front of an audience armed with smartphones and hashtags.
Karen's horrified expression, as she stood before the jiggling, glowing mass that had once been my crystal-clear pool, was a masterpiece of disbelief, rage, and complete public embarrassment.
Her sandals stuck slightly to the gelatin as she stormed toward the edge,
each step making a wet, slurping sound.
She crouched down, scooped up a glob of the goo, and stared at it like it had personally insulted her ancestors.
People around her were filming. A few were laughing quietly.
One teenager whispered to another,
"Dude, this is the best thing that's ever happened in this neighborhood."
I pretended to sip coffee, all while keeping my phone recording the entire scene from a flower pot near the edge of my patio. Karen's face began twitching, like it was short-circuiting under all the social pressure. Then, without warning, she turned and marched out of my yard, arms flapping like an angry duck. She returned 20 minutes later, with a police officer in tow. Officer Daniels, a local who had responded to one too many HOA-related nonsense calls, walked up with an expression that said he already regretted showing up.
Karen waved her arms dramatically. "He's put foreign chemicals in a recreational water body. This is an environmental violation. There are children involved. This is chemical warfare."
I tried not to laugh as Officer Daniels raised one eyebrow and looked at the gel. He knelt, scooped some up, gave it a sniff, and then actually bounced a little tennis ball off the surface.
It wobbled and flopped back up like a scene from a science experiment. He stood back up and faced me. "Is this your property, sir?" I nodded. "You know what this stuff is?" I handed him the container. "Pool-safe gelatin. Biodegradable, non-toxic, purchased from a licensed vendor. Doesn't damage filtration if properly removed. Just temporary." Daniels blinked. "Clever." Karen made a screeching sound that didn't sound entirely human. "Clever? Clever? This is vandalism." He weaponized his pool. Daniels took a step back. "Ma'am, you said this was a community pool. If it's public, then everyone's allowed to interact with it how they see fit, right? But if it's private, then he can do whatever he wants. Which is it?"
Karen's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Her logic had cornered her like a raccoon in a garage. With nothing left to argue, she screamed, stomped her foot, and flounced off to her car like a furious ballerina. What Karen didn't know was that while all this unfolded, the video was already being uploaded online by 3 different people. One clip titled "HOA Karen Discovers Jelly Pool and Implodes" had over 5,000 views within the first hour. Another video of the kid bouncing on the pool's surface had people commenting things like, "Pool 2.0. And I would pay to swim there." By sunset, the story was trending on Reddit under r/entitled people and r/di revenge. A YouTuber who made animations of crazy stories recreated the whole thing within a day, complete with a voice actress screaming in a Karen wig. I was tagged, messaged, emailed, even asked if I'd be open to interviews. For a moment, I thought about saying no. Then I realized I could use this attention to finally bring the truth out about how insane my HOA was. The following Monday, Karen tried to organize a community protest against pool vandalism. Only 4 people showed up, and one of them left halfway through because they wanted to go try jumping on the gel again. The rest of the neighborhood had turned the corner. People who had been neutral before now saw the HOA as a joke. Some folks dropped by with popcorn to watch Karen rage from her front yard like a failed revolution leader. Kids started calling my yard the Jelly Castle. One woman even asked if she could have her engagement photos taken next to the glowing blue mass. I said yes. Karen called it blasphemy. But the storm hadn't passed. Karen doubled down. She filed a formal complaint with the HOA council, which, let's be honest, was mostly her and 2 people too bored to resist her busy emails. She declared that my actions violated the community aesthetic code and posed an emotional hazard to young swimmers. It was hilarious. It was ridiculous. And it meant war. The letter she taped to my door ended with, "We're not done yet." I smiled as I crumpled it. She wanted escalation? She was going to get it. That night, I called my cousin Marcus again and told him we were adding more gel. Not just the same color, but this time, with a UV glow additive that would make it shimmer neon green and deep purple at night. I also ordered waterproof floating speakers that could play ambient sound effects. By Friday night, my pool looked like an alien lagoon from a sci-fi movie. And it sounded like it was alive, with soft bubble popping, echoing chimes, and the occasional robotic kiss. It freaked out the neighbors in a good way. Even the neighborhood pets stopped to stare. Karen, however, lost her mind completely. The next morning, she returned to the house with a clipboard and a measuring tape. She started walking around the perimeter of my yard, muttering about boundary lines and civil encroachment. I stood on the porch and asked if she needed a snack while she paced. She said nothing, just walked, measured, scribbled. I could hear her teeth grinding. Meanwhile, kids stood at the edge of the jelly pool, pretending to cast spells into it like it was a magical portal. A mom brought cupcakes. Someone else brought a lawn chair. Without intending to, my backyard had become a community gathering spot. But not because of Karen's ridiculous HOA rules. It became popular because I turned her attempt at control into something fun. Something bizarre. Something no one could have expected. Later that night, a woman knocked on my door. She introduced herself as Amelia, a local social media influencer with a travel and home decor vlog. She asked if she could feature the jelly pool in her next video. I laughed and told her sure, but only if she called it the HOA Karen Memorial Swim Zone. She agreed. The next day, the video dropped. It went viral in less than 12 hours. The title? This man turned HOA bullying into a backyard wonderland. Karen's face, captured mid-scream, was the thumbnail. It wasn't just neighborhood fame anymore. It was nationwide. And in all of that, Karen still believed she could win. Still believed the HOA's tattered rulebook had enough power to undo everything. But she was wrong. Because now the world was watching. And when the world watches, Karens don't just lose, they melt. For a few glorious days, it felt like Karen had finally run out of steam. She stopped pacing outside my fence. No more threats showed up on my doorstep. And even the HOA newsletter skipped their usual passive-aggressive paragraph about me and the pool situation. But silence from Karen wasn't peace. It was plotting, and I had a bad feeling that silence was just the deep inhale before her next explosion. That suspicion turned into confirmation late one night, when I heard the faint hum of something mechanical outside. I peered through my blinds and spotted a shadowy figure crouched near the back of the pool.
The silhouette of Karen was unmistakable,
especially with her trademark visor and oversized gardening gloves. She was dragging a yellow shop vac on wheels and muttering to herself like a cartoon villain. I slipped out the back door, staying quiet. I had already installed 3 night vision security cameras hidden in inconspicuous places around my yard, expecting that she'd try something stupid eventually.
I just hadn't predicted she'd come armed with industrial equipment. Karen had set the vacuum hose right into the jelly and flipped the switch.
The thing made a choking noise, sucked in a few globs of gel, then began to sputter violently as the substance overwhelmed its motor. She kicked it in frustration. The hose popped off, spraying bits of luminous goo all over her pant legs. She cursed loudly, kicking the machine again. "I'll ruin your little gelatin empire, you smug man-child," she muttered. The camera near the flower bed captured everything. Her hunched form, her flailing limbs, the hiss of frustration as she slipped in the gel and landed flat on her but with a dramatic squish. I watched from the porch with one eyebrow raised, arms crossed.
Karen didn't see me until I clicked on the back patio light.
She froze, like a raccoon caught in a fridge raid.
For a second, we stared at each other in silence.
Then, without a word, she scrambled to her feet, grabbed her useless shop vac, and scuttled out through the side gate, leaving behind a trail of fluorescent footprints.
I didn't stop her. I didn't yell. I didn't even ask questions.
I just smiled, walked over to the patio table, and pressed the button on my tablet. Footage from the night's chaos appeared in full HD on the screen. Karen's muttering, her threats, her fall, her glittering escape. It was perfect. The next day, I printed out screenshots from the footage and brought them to the next HOA meeting, which, for once, I was happy to attend.